Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Tuesday, the 18th day of November, 2025. And the headlines this morning are going to look at the aftermath of the UN Security Council vote yesterday. And just at the outset, we're going to tell you it's not good at all for Israel, as you can imagine. So let's look at the headlines first. Some Israel National News. U.S. President welcomes the UN approval of his Gaza plan, calling it a historic vote that will lead to further peace all over the world. That's from Israel National News. Netanyahu praises the United Nations Security Council Gaza resolution vote, thanks U.S. President Trump. That's from the Jerusalem Post. Hamas, though, rejects disarmament clause in Gaza ceasefire plan, claims it was not part of the original talks, also from the Jerusalem Post. And then from YNET, and very clear, observant point of view here, UN vote delivers a heavy blow to Israel's right wing and rewrites the Gaza future. It certainly does, and we'll talk about that. And then number 5 from the Jewish News Syndicate, Israeli concern after UN endorses Trump plan with path to Palestinian state. Again, from the Jewish News Syndicate. All right, as we can see from the headlines, there are immediate problems for Israel with the plan's approval. The direction in which things are moving are consistent with the biblical picture of the last days, and we document this in our book 25 Signs. We're near the end. It's a free download from our website, Educating Our World, and it's found under the heading of Bible Prophecy, so please look into it. We're going to mention during this program some of the points in our book 25 Signs, some of the signs that are being fulfilled by some of these headlines. So let's look at them. The headline number 1, U.S. President welcomes the UN approval of his Gaza plan, calling it an historic vote. This will lead to further peace all over the world, from Israel National News. On Monday, he welcomed the approval of the Security Council resolution of his 20-point plan for Gaza. He said, "Congratulations to the world on the incredible vote of the United Nations Security Council just moments ago." Acknowledging and endorsing the all uppercase letters here, the Board of Peace, PEACE, which will be chaired by me and include the most powerful and respected leaders throughout the world. He wrote this in a post on Truth Social. He added, "This will go down as one of the biggest approvals in the history of the United Nations, will lead to further peace all over the world, and is a moment of true historic proportion." Well, it is a moment of true historic proportion, but it's certainly not going to further peace all over the world. He says also, "Thank you to those countries that weren't on this committee but strongly backed this effort, including Qatar, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Turkey, and Jordan. The members of the board and many more exciting announcements will be made in the coming weeks," concluded Trump. 13 member states of the Security Council voted in favor of the proposal, with Russia and China abstaining. The main elements of the resolution include the establishment of an international force to stabilize the region, disarming Hamas, and creating a pathway to the establishment of a Palestinian state. The clause in the draft resolution calling for a pathway to the establishment of a Palestinian state drew sharp criticism from several government ministers in Israel, but the wording of the resolution was not amended prior to the vote. Now, here's our comment. While Trump is hailing this vote as bringing peace to the world, it is certainly not the case for Israel. In fact, the Arab Muslim countries will see this as an opportunity to further isolate Israel, as well as to contribute to its eventual destruction. We're going to see 3 signs here. While in the world spotlight, sign number 6 of our 25 signs, Israel will have no peace with its neighbors. Sign number 7, they'll be continually looking for it. Instead, they'll be further isolated. Sign 21, where anti-Semitism will increase, and basically the whole world will end up hating Israel. So that's what's going to happen from this. And so it's not good news at all. Although trying to put the best face on it, from the Jerusalem Post, Netanyahu praises the Gaza resolution vote, thanks President Trump. Israel extends its hand in peace and prosperity to all of our neighbors and calls on them to normalize relations with Israel, the Prime Minister's office said. Fat chance of that, just not going to happen. Netanyahu praised the UN Security Council's vote to implement Trump's Gaza peace plan, thanking Trump and his team for their efforts to secure the deal. The PMO's, Prime Minister's office, put on X, formerly Twitter, Tuesday morning. The State of Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu applaud President Donald Trump and his tireless and devoted team, the Post read. The courage and sacrifice of our brave soldiers, along with President Trump's diplomatic efforts, helped bring home all of the living hostages and most of the deceased ones. We believe that President Trump's plan will lead to peace and prosperity because it insists upon full demilitarization, disarmament, and de-radicalization of Gaza including the Prime Minister's office added receiving the remains of the deceased hostages left in Gaza with no delay. Well, bottom line is this is not the plan Netanyahu wanted, and there are parts of it that he's immediately pushing for that seem beyond reach, as our next headline is going to indicate. And what does the next headline say? Hamas rejects disarmament clause in Gaza ceasefire plan, claims it was not part of the original talks. We never talked about disarming. This is from the Jerusalem Post also. United Nations Security Council voted on Monday in support of Trump's Gaza peace plan and in favor of a UN mandate to establish the International Stabilization Force, the ISF, which is expected to be deployed in Gaza. Hamas rejected the clause in President Trump's Gaza peace plan regarding its disarmament, claiming it was not part of the original negotiations, the Qatar-based Al Jazeera Mubashir reported on Monday. No clause regarding the disarmament of the resistance was on the table in the Sharm el-Sheikh negotiations. Senior Hamas official Osama Hamdan told the Qatari outlet, "It is unacceptable that we're being imposed with the equation of either we are killed or we surrender." Hamdan further claimed that Hamas has contacted members of the United Nations Security Council to discuss its observations on the American draft resolution. All right, well, without the disarming of Hamas, this resolution obviously goes nowhere, right? Well, headline number 4 kind of says it all. This is very observant here from YNET. UN vote delivers a heavy blow to Israel's right wing and rewrites the Gaza future. And that's not an understatement. Listen to this. The UN Security Council's new framework for Gaza delivers a heavy setback to Israel's right wing, rejects its core demands, and marks a decisive shift towards international oversight, expanded regional involvement. The claim that last night's UN Security Council decision was the product of a plan devised by Prime Minister Netanyahu is untrue, and so is the claim that the war could have ended on its first day in precisely the same way. Still, they're trying to be optimistic here, the decision represents a significant step in the internationalization of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and a move that could open the door to regional normalization. And there is room for optimism. There's actually no room for optimism, as Will mentioned. The resolution lays out a framework that includes an armed international force in Gaza, limited involvement for a reformed Palestinian Authority, and a vague reference to a possible path towards a Palestinian state. Its language is deliberately evasive, yet it marks the first time the Security Council has ordered an armed deployment into territory captured in 1967 to serve as a buffer between Israelis and Palestinians. It also establishes a governing authority in Gaza that is neither Israel nor the PA, one that would operate without relying on Israel's approval, a profound shift. And here's our comment. It's indeed a profound shift. If an international stabilization force is implemented in Gaza, then Israel will not be able to control its own destiny. In other words, this force is in control of the whole area now. They'll have new leadership there. Israel will have basically no say-so there. So Israel has basically handed it over to the United Nations and the Arab Muslim states. That's kind of the bottom line in all this. And so it's really going to change the face of everything. So any future events that happen there, that's got to be the call of the UN. So what's going to take place, as we always ask, and this is the next question, since Hamas will not disarm, they say that's not part of it, what's going to happen? Are they going to have two separate areas? That yellow line will be like a border. Hamas will have Gaza with all its inhabitants, about 2 million citizens, and the other 53% of Gaza will be under Israeli control. Or will they try and disarm Hamas? Hamas will not disarm voluntarily. The Arab nations won't disarm them. Israel could, but Israel's not in charge anymore. Remember, it's now the United Nations call. So let's wait and see what happens here. Now, finally, headline number 5 from the Jewish News Syndicate, Israeli concern after UN endorses Trump plan with a path to a Palestinian state, and as they should be concerned. The vast majority, as we've talked about, is the Israeli public, 75 to 80%, reject another Palestinian terrorist state, which this time would overlook the Ben Gurion airport. Yeah, can you imagine that? Dan Dicker, president of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, told the Jewish News Syndicate, yeah, actually overlook the Ben Gurion airport. U.S., the United Nations voted 13 to 0 with two abstentions, as we talked about yesterday, to approve a U.S. drafted resolution endorsing Washington's 20-point plan for Gaza. Experts told the Jewish News Syndicate that they should worry about the plan's pathway to Palestinian statehood. Smotrich, the Israeli finance minister, said the deterioration was due to Prime Minister Netanyahu's silence, and Ben Gvir, the Israel National Security Minister, said his party would not be part of any government that agrees to a Palestinian state. It's not only the right-wing ministers that are against this, Dan Dicker said. His organization found in polling that 75 to 80% of the Israelis reject another Palestinian terror state. He said it's unfair to blame Netanyahu, who wants to maintain close ties with U.S. President Donald Trump and keep the possibility open to normalizing with Saudi Arabia, according to Dicker, who said Trump has been making enormous efforts to bring Riyadh into the Abraham Accords. Remember, Mohammed bin Salman is there today in Washington. We'll see what happens from that. Israel doesn't want to come across as a killjoy and pour cold water in the U.S.-sponsored plan, Dicker said. He said to the Jewish News Syndicate that the Trump administration is making a mistake by taking its plan to the United Nations, which he thinks he did at the urging of Arab partners, which it certainly did, who hope to use the global body as an international lever. Now, get this, to isolate Israel and bring further pressure against it. Bingo. That's exactly what they're going to do. Further isolate Israel, bring pressure against it, because now they got the UN in charge of all this. Efforts to establish a Palestinian state won't work, and repeating calls for a two-state solution ignore the nature of the struggle that Israel faces. We face jihad. We face a religious war. It's been what psychologists call a resistant experience, Dicker said. That's when you know something's true, but you don't want to admit it to yourself. Martin Sherman, founder of the Israeli Institute for Strategic Studies, told the Jewish News Syndicate that the notion of a Palestinian state is a dangerous mirage. It's been the centerpiece of the dialogue on the Israeli-Arab conflict for almost a third of a century, and we're no closer to it. The reason that they haven't done it is because it's not the real aspiration. Here's the key. The aspiration is not to build a Palestinian state, but to demolish a Jewish state. Again, right on the mark. A critic of the Oslo Accords since they were proposed in 1993, Sherman was harsher in his criticism of Israeli leadership, calling the Trump plan a grave missed opportunity by the Netanyahu government. When Trump spoke about relieving Gaza of its current population and rebuilding it, Israel should have immediately embraced, advanced, and anchored in the public debate, according to Sherman. In every other global conflict, civilians are allowed to exit combat zones, he said. Israel now finds itself with the Trump plan, which in point 19 calls for the redevelopment of Gaza, reform of the Palestinian Authority, and a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. And again, on another story we didn't get to here in this edition of Breaking News, the Palestinian Authority is already hailing this as a victory, and it's demanding movement towards an immediate implementation of a Palestinian state. Why should we think otherwise? The nations of the world will likely get behind this push, which spells trouble for Israel. Okay, all in all, nothing's really changed on the ground, nor it will until Hamas is removed, which is easier said than done. So stay tuned. What's going to happen? Because that's the big question. What to do about Hamas, disarming them? Are they going to be disarmed? Who's going to do it? Since the UN now is in charge of Gaza. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Again, our second edition of Breaking News today will have the highlights of Trump and Mohammed bin Salman, who's in D.C., and some of the highlights of what they've agreed to. It's supposed to be quite a lot of pomp there in this ceremony today, so it should be a lot more stories. But this is where we're at right now. This is a summary of exactly where we're at. And basically, like we said, it's really bad for Israel. Gaza is now in the control of the United Nations, not them. And if Israel wants to do something, move here, move there, they're going to say, sorry, it's not under your control anymore. We're trying to get the stabilization force in there. So keep your hands off. All right. I'm Don Stewart. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless you.